Good afternoon. I hope everybody is having a good Christmas week. Despite it being the Christmas break, I did want to come on still and do another live stream. So this is going to be your chance to ask me any questions that you have related to starting strength training, particularly as an older adult. So that's whether it's starting strength training or whether you've been doing it but you sort of not making the progress you want to. But it's generally based at anyone in those early stages. So there are no stupid questions. The chances are, if you're thinking it, someone else has also got the same question. So please feel free to ask any questions that you do have. This is going out live on YouTube as well as Facebook. So on YouTube, you can use the chat feature during the live stream, or use a comment if you're watching the replay later on. And on Facebook, you can just use a comment underneath the video. Those comments will come through to me and I'll be able to bring those up on screen, and I'll deal with any questions I can during the call or during the stream. And then if any come in after this is finished, I'll then try and cover those on future weeks. So whilst you're there, also really useful help from me, if you can just give the video a thumbs up and a like, and that helps to spread it out and more people see that I'm live and can join us. And also, if you just make sure you're subscribed on YouTube or you follow on Facebook, and you'll be able to see every time I do a live stream. Good. So what we'll do, I'm going to start off by, I've had two questions actually this week that have come in regarding sort of hernias and management of weightlifting around hernias. So I'm just going to cover those two questions to begin with. So the first one came through on on YouTube last week. It was quite a long reply or question, so I've just kind of paraphrased it here for the moment. So I'm recovering from surgery from a hernia repair. What exercises can I do in the early stages of recovery? And basically they went on to say that they'd had issues for a while, but due to complications they've had emergency surgery recently, and they've been told they're not allowed to do any squats in these early stages and sort of similar based exercises, but equally they don't want to sit around and do nothing. So they just wanted to sort of know what is good options that they can do at this stage or not. So I'm going to start by just kind of almost like a disclaimer out there that I don't know the details of your surgery or what the hernia was like before. So anything I go through now, if you come up with a bit of a plan, do take it past your surgeon or consultant and just run it past them and do double check, because I can't, without knowing all the details, know. And the last thing I want to do is you do anything that might undo any of the surgery. But basically, when we're doing anything like squats or deadlifts or some of the compound or functional movement patterns, we're using multiple muscle groups at the same time. And when we're doing that, we often will increase the intra-abdominal pressure as well, because we're often bracing around our abdomen as well as the muscle group we're targeting, so much say the thighs, so the quads and the glutes for, say, a squat. But if they've done an EMG studies where they looked at the abdominal recruitment during a squat with a heavy weight, and it's often as high as an abdominal based exercise like a sit-up. So every time we build and brace around the abdomen, we're going to increase the intra-abdominal pressure, so that pressure within the abdomen that's pushing back out against the abdominal wall. And if you've had a hernia, it's been an issue because of the pressure within there that has caused the hernia in the first place. And with a repair, whilst it is now repaired, in those early stages we're going to have to go through some healing. So if you suddenly increase the amount of pressure from within the abdomen whilst it's trying to settle, that could well cause an issue, and that's something we don't want to do. But if the surgeon has said he's happy if you do some exercise just to avoid those high pressure exercises, then the thing you're going to focus on at the moment is isolated exercises. So you're targeting one muscle group at a time. So for example, you might be doing a bicep curl, and so you're just bending the elbow, holding a weight, and then slowly lowering back down again. And particularly if you do that seated and your back is supported, you're going to have very little abdominal pressure increase there. You might as well be able to do some lateral raises. if you're sitting with your back supported, you might be able to do a shoulder press. I wouldn't do a shoulder press if you're sat upright away from a support, or if you're stood, because the weight up here will, if it goes back, you're suddenly going to need that abdomen to engage to sort of reset yourself. Equally, anything where you're, generally anything standing I would avoid for the moment because of that reason. Seated exercises with a lot of support, or laying down with the support underneath you is good. Machine weights are going to be particularly useful here. So you might do knee extensions where you're kicking the leg forwards against a pad, or you're using a hamstring curl to bring backwards. But yeah, if you're anyone who's suffering from abdominal type surgery in the early stages, and you're worried about that increase in intra-abdominal pressure, I would go for isolated exercises where you're seated, and avoid things where you're standing, having to control a lot of weight and that balance around there. He also asked about the intensity to perform it at, and again, whilst you're in the early stages, it is about doing a bit so that you're not sitting around doing nothing, which is how we phrase a question. So compare what you're doing to doing nothing, and be happy that you're doing something, rather than thinking you're being held back from doing the higher levels of that. So you would want to work against lower resistance, and potentially not even pushing to muscle fatigue. You're just going through the motions, keeping the brain engaged with the muscle groups that we're trying to target, and then you can gradually build from there. I wouldn't start trying to push to fatigue, particularly with high weights with a lot of these exercises, because the chances are you're going to increase a lot of that intra-abdominal pressure. Because if you think about it, even with a knee extension, you tend to find you hold the handles and you really kind of fix and hold your breath and push, and that is all going to start to add to the pressure that could cause an issue with your hernia repair. So I would probably just focus on lighter weights, maybe start with even less than half of the weight you normally use, and then gradually build it. So I think that kind of covers everything there. But again, as I said at the start, come up with an idea of the exercises you want to work on, with those isolation ones and the well-supported exercises in terms of how you're positioned, and then run it past your consultant first, or your surgeon, and check they're happy. And if you've got a more conservative surgeon, then I would still do what they say, be frustrated for a few weeks, and then gradually build from there. But let's say the last thing I want you to do is cause any issues from having watched this video, given that I don't know anything about your repair. But in general, that's kind of the focuses, or the things I'd look at. So another question that came through just about an hour or two ago through Facebook was someone asking if I have any specific guidelines or knowledge for a 50-plus menopausal woman who wants to start weight training, but number one, has had surgery for a hernia 15 years ago, and two, has never weight trained, and until recently refused to do any exercise, but has started generally running or jogging, and who is generally unfit. The history of hernia surgery is a main concern, as all the general online content is addressing this seems to be for ongoing hernia, and does not specifically call into account the need and importance for weight training in menopausal women. So a little bit to unravel there, but I'd say firstly, well done for having got started already with the running and jogging, and the fact you've asking the question and you're looking into starting resistance training is fantastic. So yeah, it's certainly in the right place for the resistance training aspect of that, and it's definitely something you're going to see the benefits of, and I'll talk through a little bit with that, particularly with regards to menopause. But I'd say for the surgery for the hernia repair, and the fact you said it's not necessarily an ongoing hernia and it's surgery we had 15 years ago, without knowing more details, again, it's difficult. But if you've not really had any problems with the hernia, and it's just that awareness that you've had surgery in the past, and you're just worried that it could cause an issue, then it's probably, if it's managing well with all the things you do day to day, then you'll probably find that it won't be an issue going forwards. Because if you're coming into this without much of a history behind you of doing weights, and without much of a base of fitness level, particularly with the concern about the hernia and maybe some other things, we're going to be taking this very gradually and very slowly, and taking small steps rather than large strides forwards. So our bodies are incredible at being able to adapt positively to the demands that we place upon it. And if we do it very slowly and give the body time to adapt, it becomes this strong, resilient body that can start to deal with more and more. And yes, it's easier when we're younger to kind of create that robustness and resilience, but it's still completely possible to build it later on down the line as well. If you start taking massive steps when you're not quite ready for them, that's when potentially the issue can occur. So I'll talk through it I've got another question that refers to starting strength training safely when you've got no history of doing it, and I'll expand a bit more. But generally, the path I tend to sort of suggest to people is you start to get comfortable with exercises first without necessarily any resistance to begin with, and once you're confident with those exercises, you're gradually going to add a bit of resistance to it and get used to doing some against resistance, whether that's the weight or resistance band or kind of machine or similar. And then we're going to start to get confident building or pushing the muscles to the point of fatigue. And I'll explain a bit more in detail in a second about that. And then once you're confident with pushing muscles to fatigue, then you're going to gradually increase the weights further in order to really build the strength, because it is that pushing to fatigue that builds the strength. But because we've gone through this slow, gradual process, anything around that surgery site for the hernia is going to gradually adapt positively to that, and they'll learn to deal with the demands of that. And if it does start to become symptomatic and painful or problematic in that time, then we may well need to take a little step back for a couple of weeks before pushing on again, or it might be that we need to modify and adapt to that particular exercise in the same way that anyone who's suffering with knee pain during an exercise might have to adapt how they squat in order to build the squat back into it. With regards to the being unfit and not necessarily done much in the past, again, because we're taking things slowly through a number of factors, you'll find your fitness levels are gradually going to improve as we go through. And for me, I don't mind how long it takes someone to progress through that kind of cycle of confidence, add a bit of weight, muscle fatigue, and then really push muscle fatigue with higher weights. As long as you know that that is the plan at some point, is you're going to have to push and lift a bit heavier to really build the strength. You can stay on each stage as confident for as long as you feel confident to, before you step it back up again and step it up again. And you'll find that you're able to build your fitness levels whilst building the site around the surgery becomes more resilient, and then your bone density and everything else, which I'll come on to now. So in terms of building weight training into the menopause side of things, again, a lot of it comes down to that intra-abdominal pressure, again, that may be related to the hernia. But some of the things that stop a lot of women from starting who've had menopause or gone through it are symptoms around bladder leakage, symptoms around prolapse, or symptoms around bowel leakage as well. And it's a bit of catch-22, because the reasons that you don't want to do it start strength training, because of fears of that whilst you're doing it. The weight training has been shown to actually reduce those symptoms. So by doing it, you actually reduce it, but you don't want to start because of it. And so, yeah, it becomes very difficult, and I do fully appreciate that. And it's the same with bone densities. People who have less bone density, the thing it's suggested they do is to add weight bearing with load and impact exercises. But if you've been told you've got low bone density, the thing you're fearful of is weight bearing with load and impact, because you're worried about breaking a bone that has low density. So as long as, again, we gradually progress forwards and take it step by step very slowly, giving the body and the bones time to adapt, you'll be fine. But in terms of that study, they showed that people who postmenopausal women started them on a strength training program, and what they found is that women who lifted 50 kilograms or more had less prolapse symptoms than women who lifted less than 15 kilograms. So lifting 50 or more, that's 50 or more, had less prolapse symptoms than those who lifted 15 or less, 15 or less. And it's almost counterintuitive, because people who lift or who are worried about those symptoms thinks that lifting heavy with a heavy weight will really increase that intra-abdominal pressure and is more likely to cause them a prolapse symptom or bladder leakage or something similar. So they stick safe and they stick with the lower weights. But this is showing actually by lifting the heavier weights, you're less likely to have those symptoms. But again, I'm not suggesting you suddenly go out and jump to 50 kilograms worth of weight straight away if you haven't done that before and you've got no history of lifting weights in the past. You are going to start with the 15 kilograms or less. But rather than stick there and thinking you're keeping safe, which is what a lot of people tend to do, is to stay within what they feel is a safe zone, you do need to keep nudging out of your safety zone and keep pushing out of your comfort zone in order to get to those bigger weights to really gain the benefits of being stronger. But we have to bear in mind, if your hernia site becomes a bit aggravated or symptomatic, then we need to adapt around that. If there's any other pains that come about, we need to adapt around that. Or if your fitness level is really holding you back, then we need to adapt around that. So again, it doesn't matter how long it takes you to progress. It can be as slow as we need to, but we do need to progress and push out your comfort zone at some point with that. So I hope that kind of answers your question with that one there. It kind of brings me nicely on, if you are looking for a little bit more help in order to get started, then I've got a completely free download that you can go to. This is the Never Told to Lift ebook. So that's nevertoldtolift.com/start-here. Or if you have a look in the description of this video, you'll find the links to it there. So this is going to help guide through a lot of that theory of building confidence up to the pushing to muscle fatigue and why that's also important. It's going to help with the goal planning phase and making sure that you're working towards some positive goals. But it's also going to help with the exercise selection and help you find some adaptations that you might need, because I recognise that not everyone can just do all exercises. There's some that you're not going to be able to do. So rather than leave that out, you're going to try and do a different exercise or a slightly different variation of exercises so you can then progress on from there. And it's going to help with there. So if that is something that you're interested in, it's nevertoldtolift.com/start-here. I'm also in a week or two's time going to be doing a free online presentation or sort of a free online talk or webinar, whatever you want to label that as. But it's basically an hour where I'm going to go through with some slides and images of the same kind of process of how you might want to get started or why you want to get started and how you might get started and a few actionable steps you can take away. So all completely aimed at the beginner stage of lifting weights, or for anyone who's had a gap, who's wanted to gradually get back into it. But if you're interested in those, you do need to register. So it's nevertoldtolift.com/webinar, and you'll get through to the links there. Or if you look in the description below, again, you'll find the links directly to each of those webinars there. So it's either on the 9th of January at 7 or Wednesday the 10th at 1 o'clock. They are the same webinar both days. You don't need to come to both. I've just put on an evening and a lunchtime one. So you just pick the day it's more suitable for you. And there will be recordings of those. So if you can't make it, then I will send the recording out. But to give yourself the best chance of receiving that recording, do register for one of them. And I will send that out to you. I will try and get it out to everyone anyway, but if you register, you'll definitely get those recordings there. Good, and for anyone who is watching live now, do feel free to ask any questions. So again, on YouTube, if you're watching it there's a chat feature on the right hand side, and you'll be able to ask them there. And if you're on Facebook, there's a comments section below the video. You can ask any and they'll kind of flash up to me. If you're watching after this is finished, then do use the comments on both YouTube and Facebook, and I will answer those in future weeks. Or alternatively, if you are watching but you don't want your name to come up anywhere and you're worried about that side of things and in terms of asking a question, then feel free to email me. So it's chris@nevertooldtolift.com. Again, that's chris@nevertooldtolift.com, and you can ask me any questions there. I probably won't get to it in this video with the email ones, but I will cover those in future weeks. But I've had another question that came in, and it was I'm really keen to start, but I'm 57 and I've never done any strength or resistance training, so I need to know how to begin safely so I don't cause a problem/injury that might stop me doing more. There is so much on the internet that I need something I can rely on and trust, as it's also confusing. I want to know what I need to do to protect myself in older age to build a combination of strength with flexibility and balance of bone health. So I'll start at the end there. So we've already kind of covered in that last question the benefits of being stronger will help protect yourself with increased bone density, and having better muscle mass will help to kind of create a better suspension system, but help to create a robust, resilient body. So yeah, certainly something that's worth getting into, but I completely recognise it. There is a lot out there. It's one of those things that building strength, there's the goal or the destination you're trying to get to, but there's various routes you can do in order to get to that. And it's very different coming to this at an older age where you might have some pre-existing injuries or conditions that you're trying to work around, whereas someone in their 20s doesn't have to necessarily think about that quite so much, and their body adapts a little bit quicker, so they don't have to respect that quite as much. They can push a little bit more aggressively sooner. So kind of briefly mentioned the kind of stages that I tend to guide someone through as you go through this, and this is all available in the ebook if you want it, but generally you're going to want to pick a routine of exercises where you can get from, because actually the building the strength part there's quite a simple structure to that part in terms of pushing a muscle to fatigue and it getting stronger as a result. The thing that makes this a lot trickier at an older age is finding the starting group of exercises to begin with, because it's generally, if you find an online program or whether it's in a book or something else, or you've gone to a gym, there's normally one exercise that you struggle with, whether that's your knee pain during a squat or something similar. So what people tend to do is they leave that one exercise out and just focus on the ones they can do. But what you tend to find is the one that you left out that you couldn't do is a one that you could probably do with being better at, and that's going to make a dramatic difference to your life. But because we're leaving out, it's probably not going to get any better, and you just get better at the things you're already good at. So it's finding ways to adapt to actually bring that exercise back in again. And there's often ways, or whether that's reducing the height of a surface you're trying to squat down to, or whether you're holding on to something to offload your body weight slightly. There's lots of different variations and adaptations you can take. But once you've found that starting group of exercises, you just want to work on those for 2 or 3 weeks to really build the confidence in the exercises you're doing. And then once you have done that, each of those exercises will include a different way of adding resistance to it. So that could be adding a weight, adding a resistance band. It could just be body weight. With weights, it doesn't necessarily need to be a dumbbell or a kettlebell. It could be a bottle of water, or a bottle of Scream Wash is 5 litres of water, so that's 5 kilograms straight away. And once you've started to feel familiar with using some resistance, that's when this point of muscle fatigue really kicks in. So initially you want to try and do it within 15 repetitions, and say that you were aiming for 15 repetitions and you got to the end and you couldn't have done any more because your muscles didn't have the strength to do any more. That's when we really are building strength as a result. In the recovery period after that, that's where you're going to get stronger. If you stopped at 15 and you just couldn't do any more, then if you got to the 15 and you could have done at least 5 or 6 more, then stopping at the arbitrary figure of 15 isn't necessarily going to build strength, and doing more isn't now necessarily going to build any strength. What you need to do is increase the weight again, so that 15th is starting to feel like almost the last one you can do. Then we get to the next phase, is once you've got comfortable at pushing to fatigue at 15, we want to increase the weight again, so that you might now start reaching fatigue at 5 repetitions. And after a few weeks of doing that, you might want to increase the weight again, so you hit fatigue at 10 repetitions, and then down to 8 after a few more weeks. And then if you can get it close to 5 repetitions, that's where we really build strength. So obviously you're going to need a lot higher weight at 5 repetitions reaching fatigue at 5 repetitions that you did at 15. So that's why I don't jump straight to reaching fatigue at 5 there, because you need to go through that whole process to give the body time to adapt. And that's where you're less likely to get any of these problems or injuries, because you've given the body so much time to get to that point. But equally, you don't want to just stall on one point because you feel safe and then feel scared to push again. Because once, say you got to the point where 15 was the last you could manage, if you worked on that for a few weeks with the same weight, you're going to get to a point where actually you suddenly realise that now I could do probably 5 or 6 more if I wanted to, which means I'm now not getting stronger as a result of doing it. So that's why you do want to add the weight to it. But equally, if any symptoms become apparent, so the knees again, or shoulder or back, then again, we do want to then respect that, adapt at that point, or just hold back for a little bit before we then push on again. And that will help to avoid any issues as well. So I hope that helps there. Let's say, if you did want to, the Never Taught to Lift ebook will guide you through all of that. So just a quick reminder, it's, let's hide this. So it's nevertaughtolift.com/start-here, and that's completely free download. If you found you're someone who likes a physical copy of a book rather than trying to read it off a screen on an ebook, then you can find it on Amazon as well. So if you just go to Amazon and search for Never Too Old to Lift, you should find that straight away, or again in the description you'll find the link straight to the Amazon link there. And for anyone else who might be interested, I've also got the Stronger for Life course. So if you wanted a more interactive way of going through all that theory, so all in video format rather than reading it through a book, then the Stronger for Life course is something you might be interested in. With the Stronger for Life course, you also get access to me via a group Zoom call every week, which is on a Wednesday at 10:30 in the morning, so that's GMT. But that helps particularly for the starting point. Is if you're struggling to find a starting exercise for any of the movement patterns, rather than just kind of giving up with it, you can come onto the calls, let me know what you've tried, what your problems are, and I can help just tweak things from there. And you'll also be able to hear everyone else's questions, which might resonate with you as well. So if you are interested in that, it's nevertaughtolift.com/course. Again, as a reminder, if you're watching this live, feel free to ask any questions whilst we're live, or if you're watching this later on, then do comment and I will answer that in future weeks. But I did just have one more question that came in this week, and it was actually regarding the Stronger for Life course. So it's, would I be better using a personal trainer or an online course like Stronger for Life? And so just a few pointers on that I wanted to go over. So in general, yes, I would say if you have got the option of using a personal trainer, then I would probably go for a personal trainer over an online course kind of every time. Because the advantages you've got with a personal trainer is that they are working with you one-to-one. It's that accountability that you know that you've paid for your session with a personal trainer, so you're going to turn up and they're going to help guide you through, and they're going to help you with the exercises. So if you find one that you can't do, they're going to help you in person adapt it, and it's a lot easier for that adapting or modifying of exercises if you're doing it face to face with someone who is just there to look after you. What I would say with personal trainers and even with physiotherapists like myself, that there are some fantastic personal trainers and there are not so good ones. There's some fantastic physios and not so good ones. And with personal trainers, what they're generally really good at is finding your start point and progressing and working from there. But if you're struggling to find a start point, not all of them are great at finding the early stage modifications, adaptations, so that you can find ways of doing that exercises, where physios tend to be really good at that stage, because we deal with people with injuries and we use exercise, or most physios use exercise primarily as our way of getting people to move again and start to manage their pain and become hopefully symptom free. But not all physios are great at pushing beyond that, because particularly with the NHS, we're only allowed to get you to a certain point, or once people are out of pain, they then aren't motivated to come in. So we're not always there to push you beyond to really build that robustness and resilience. So if you've tried a personal trainer or you've tried a physio in the past and they've not worked for you, doesn't mean that all for personal trainers, all physios won't work for you. The thing I would say with personal trainers as well is I would make sure that you find one that includes you with the goal planning and the planning of progressions down the line, because some personal trainers, it's not something they're trying to hold back, but they're not always tell you what the plan is going forward. So you turn up for your session, which is the beauty of a personal trainer. You turn up, you just do what you need to do and you leave again. You don't have to think at any point in the stage. You just turn up and do it. But if you are working with someone and they're gradually making progressions but without communicating that to you, and you suddenly get in a position where you either can't afford a personal trainer anymore, or that personal trainer moves on and you're stuck without them, if you didn't know what the plan was, it's hard to carry on yourself. And if you're then not progressing towards anything, you kind of give up with it and step aside. So for me, I'm always, if you know the reasons you're doing the exercises you're doing, you know why you're doing the number of repetitions and the sets you're doing, and you know what the plan is moving forwards, even when you're working with a personal trainer, it's really motivating to see that progression and see how far you now are from the goal that you've set with that personal trainer. So if you're working with a personal trainer, try and get one who communicates well with you, that is constantly working towards your goals. And if you're not, then, or if you don't feel like you know what the plan is, or if you feel like you've lost sight of what the goals are, then keep reminding them, because sometimes it is easy to step away and they won't be offended with that. Work with them and just remind them that this is what I want to achieve. Or sometimes that once you see progress, that unlocks new things that you suddenly think that were out of your reach are suddenly now within reach, and that's something actually you might want to try or do. And again, if you talk to the personal trainer through that can help. So yeah, the answer is I'd always use a personal trainer if you've got the finances to be able to pay for that. I understand being in a cost of living crisis and things like that, then often that is one of the first people consider luxuries that tends to go is the use of a personal trainer. So from there, you then, if you can't afford a personal trainer, it's really important you do have a plan of some form. So the thing I try and really push people away from is 1 week watching one, YouTube video, and then next week doing a different one, and the next week different one, and not having the consistency. So going back to the last question where I talked about that kind of framework of building confidence, building resistance, and then adding to that resistance and pushing to muscle fatigue, is initially you're going to be doing the same exercise. So you might do a couple of workouts per week. Each of them might contain 4 exercises, but you're working those same workouts each week for 3, 4, 5 months. And after that point, you then might change all the exercises again and then progress through those ones. What you're not doing is 1 week trying one lot of exercise and another week trying another lot of exercise, and then never really having the consistency to be able to build from there. So it makes it really important to have a plan that you're then working through. And again, you want to see where you are on that progression and on that journey. So that's where, and a little plug for it again, is the Never Taught to Lift ebook can come in. That's going to help you create that 12-week plan for you. And that 12-week plan for someone might be 12 weeks, or if you're starting without any experience at all, or you just have less confidence, then that might be 16 weeks. That might be a little bit longer. It doesn't have to be 12 weeks, but it's a plan that you can put together and work through yourself. Or, as I've said, an online course. Again, not all online courses are equal, and so I can't speak for the contents of other people's, but the one like Stronger for Life is the same thing as the ebook. It's going to help you create your own program around your own ability levels and any injuries or conditions that you might have, and then it's going to help talk you through how to progress in the later stages of that. I think the thing that differentiates Stronger for Life from other online courses I've seen is the fact that you do get the chance to check in with me weekly and ask me questions about how to adapt or progress, because again, a lot of people with online courses, if there's no contact with the person leading it, is if you find there is a sticking point or something happens and you're not sure if you should push through or hold back, and that uncertainty often leads people just to stop and and rest, or just they don't have the confidence to make a decision, so they hold back. So having something like that where you can check in with the person leading the course might be useful as well. But yeah, that's a kind of long answer to yes, I'd use a personal trainer if you've got access to it. If you haven't got access to a personal trainer, then having an online program that you understand why that program looks like that is a next best thing, whether that's an ebook, whether that's an online course, again, whether that's with me, whether that's someone else, but knowing why you're doing it is the really important part there. Good, so let's just close that. Again, just a couple, that's all the prepared questions that I had. So if anyone's watching now and does have a question, now's your last chance to type that in the box, or in the chat on YouTube or in the comments on Facebook. Whilst I'm just waiting on there, will remind you of the online presentations that I'm doing. And it's nevertoiltolift.com/webinar. So these are hour-long presentations with slides and images and some videos in there that just a lot of the stuff I talked about here, but in a lot more detail. And hopefully it's going to give you the inspiration you need and all the theory you need to get started with a few actionable steps. So do join me on there. I say there will be recordings if you can't make it, but do register for one of them. You'll get a chance to, I'll send the recording through and you'll be able to go from there. If you're in live, you'll get the chance to ask questions as we're going through as well. So I'd love to see you on there if you can make it. And then just one last reminder of the free ebook. So it's nevertoiltolift.com/start-here. But all the links to everything I've talked about are in the description below. I will be doing another one next Wednesday, just because I've got a 3-year-old son and nursery isn't open next week. I'm not 100% sure of the timing yet, so look out on the emails or on Facebook and I will update you with the time of that. It'll either be first thing in the morning or I might have to wait until the evening when he's in bed. It's unlikely to be at the lunchtime time again. But do send me any questions in advance. It's chris@nevertoiltolift.com. Again, one last request: if you're watching this all the way through and it's been helpful at all, please do give it a thumbs up, whether it's on Facebook or YouTube. So underneath the video, just like the video, because that really does help spread it out to more people who can see this. And if you aren't already subscribed to Never Toil to Lift on YouTube, do follow me there, or do subscribe to make sure you see the next week's one as it's announced. And same on Facebook, is just make sure you're following the Facebook page from there. But thank you for watching this far through. I hope it's been useful, and please just send me the questions as we go through. So have a great new year, and I'll see you next week.